بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على تاج المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا محمد ذي القدر العظيم وعلى آله وصحبه وأتباعه إلى يوم الدين. Welcome to our daily live question and answer sessions that are presented by Seekers Guidance Canada here at Jami Masjid, Mississauga. It's beautiful Masjid, alhamdulillah. And we've been getting people logging in from all over, and there have been some very good questions. So, and if people here have questions, do feel free to ask. One of the questions related to one asked that, is it true that if the adhan is given and I'm still eating, that I can still finish my food? Can I finish my food? I heard that there's a hadith about it. Yes, there's a hadith about it, but it's very important with hadith that one has to make sure that one has understood the hadith correctly. So it's come in hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that if the adhan is given and one of you is eating, then let them complete their food. So the Prophet ﷺ said that, but it's not understood in the way some people argue. Imam An-Nawawi tells us that there is consensus, that there is scholarly consensus that any food or drink consumed after the moment Fajr enters breaks one's fast. That any food or drink consumed after Fajr time enters breaks one's fast. Because the Quran is clear that you can eat and drink until the break of dawn, when dawn enters. And the hadiths about that are clear. So then what do we do with this hadith that the Prophet ﷺ did say, and it's a sound hadith, that you can eat, you can finish eating when the adhan is given? It's understood, and as we mentioned, by ijma', by scholarly consensus, to refer to the first of the two adhans that would be given during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ had, the main mu'adhin was Sayyidina Bilal ibn Rabah, but also the famous blind companion, Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Maktoum, would also give the adhan. And they would give two adhans during Ramadan. One adhan to indicate that now is the recommended time for you to stop eating. But that time is recommended. So if you started eating your suhoor late, you still have food in your mouth, finish it, because this is the recommended time. So it's referring to the first adhan, not to the adhan of Fajr. And between the two, as the Sahaba described, would typically be about 50, the extent of 50 verses of the Quran, which is about 10 minutes roughly, 10 minutes. So that's what it refers to. But once Fajr time is in, one does not eat or drink. Then if you do have something in your mouth and the time is coming in, take it out. Right? That's not considered wastefulness, it's obligatory. Right? It's obligatory. Any other questions from the street? So there's a question also that, does smelling bakhur, right, incense, or smelling perfume break the fast? So something that has smoke, smoke is considered to be a discernible body. Smoke is considered to be a discernible body. So if you inhale smoke, it does break the fast. It does break the fast. However, so if you inhale smoke directly, it breaks the fast. But if the smoke dissipates in the air, then it does not break the fast. So for example, if you burn some incense right in front of you on the table, and you put your head over it before it dissipates in the air, that is a discernible body, it breaks the fast. Similarly, if you're cooking, there's steam. Now, if someone is making food that gives off a lot of steam, do you have to stop do you have to stop breathing? That Hamza, please don't breathe while you're cooking. No, that's unavoidable. The smoke in the kitchen, as it dissipates, you can smell the food, but it's dissipated. That's fine. But you cannot put your head over the pot and deliberately inhale, because that's readily avoidable. So that would break the fast. Smelling perfume does not break the fast at all. Actually, using perfume does not affect the fast, and it's not disliked. So any otherwise permissible uses of perfume remain permissible and praiseworthy. We are rewarded for these elements of beauty in our lives. When you put on perfume, you intend the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. You're rewarded for that. You brush your teeth. You intend the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. You're rewarded every time you brush your teeth, etc. So in short, directly inhaling smoke when it's avoidable would break the fast. The smoke in the air or is unavoidable does not break the fast. And then another of the questions that has come in here that I have is that is it better for me to rush to complete the Quran in Ramadan or to reflect? So this falls under the door of the nafil, and the door of the nafil of the voluntary acts is vast and wide. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us a lot of leeway with respect to voluntary actions. So it is recommended to make ikthar min al-tilawa, to recite a lot of Quran, but the sunnah of recitation is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا, recite the Quran in a steady, measured pace. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَا تُحَرِّكْ بِهِ لِسَانَكَ لِتَعْجَلَ بِهِ, do not move your tongue fast with it so that you can be hasty with it. Right? So recite an amount that you can recite at a dignified pace. You give, at least, even when you recite quickly, you might not do all the rules of tajweed if you know proper recitation, but you do the basic rules of tajweed, which is you need tasheeh al-huruf, right? Wa ada al-mudud, right? That you recite the letters properly and you do the basic mudud, right? The basic elongations. So if you can do that, then how much you recite, the door's open. One should have some amount of just devotional recitation and some amount of reflection. The mix that you choose is really up to you. But there is a devotional benefit in ikthar, in reciting. It's a quantity of Quran, and it's also, there's great benefit in a reflective recitation. Some of the Salaf, some of the early Muslims, it's related that they used to have 3 types of khatam of the Quran. One khatam, they do one complete recitation of the Quran. This would be their devotional recitation. The devotional recitation, you read it at a steady pace with attentively. A second khatam would be their khatam for understanding. The khatam of understanding, they would pause things that are not clear. So that would be a khatam that you're doing, and you dip into the tafsir, for example, here and there. Right? And that's why you find many copies of the mushaf of the Quran that have tafsir in the margin, a mid-sized tafsir. So there you recite from the text of the Quran. This can also be done with a translation. Right? That you can get copies of, for example, Professor Muhammad Abdul Halim's translation. You have the full mushaf in the middle, and the margins you have the translation. And that's useful. So you read the khatam, you may read less of that. You may read less of that. That's the second type of recitation. To recitation with some effort to understand. Whether you read all the translation or you read parts of the translation, that's a second type of recitation. It's good to have a khatam related to that. A third is a journey of a lifetime, which is to recite the Quran with deep reflection. With deep reflection. And they say many of the great tafasir, many of the great exegeses of the Quran were the result of a lifetime of reflection from some of the great scholars. Right? Some of them actually didn't. They were great scholars. Like there's one of the great Ottoman scholars, and arguably there's a lot of competition. One of the greatest Shaykh al-Islams of the Ottoman Empire, Abu Saud al-Imadi, Shaykh al-Islam, Abu Saud al-Imadi. He was the Shaykh al-Islam of the Ottoman Empire in its heyday, and one of the longest serving Shaykh al-Islams, and him and Ibn Kamal Basha are two of the greatest of the Ottoman scholars. But he didn't author any books. Except for one book. And he used to give hundreds of fatwas a day. He issued edicts and they're compiled, but he didn't write many books. But he wrote his tafsir. And the Ottomans would refer to him as Khatib al-Mufassirin, the spokesman of the people of tafsir. And this is a common phenomenon. So there's different levels of recitation. But get recitation going in your life. And that's the practice. Don't complicate. Sometimes we sit and theorize. Should we do A or should we do B? Let me think about it. No. They say one of the tricks of the shaitan is that when you decide to do something good, he'll come to you in the guise of the philosopher. So how should I do this? Should I do it this way or that way? So they say when you get an urge to do the good, do the immediate good that occurs to you. That is not excessive. Right? So for example, you see a beggar and you get an urge, okay, I'll give him $1. Give them $1. The shaitan said, well, why don't you give him 20? Because he looks really down and out. He said, and then you get other ideas. Maybe I should give it to the masjid and say, anytime you get an inclination to do the good, do some of it. Right? And this is one of the things in the Quran of rushing to the good. So if you get a thing, I should recite more Quran, first thing to do, open the Quran and recite. You just do a page, do a few verses. So you make the habit of, when you get the warid al-khair, when you get the call to do some good, do it. And so you get the thought, I think I should do more nafil prayer, more extra prayers in my life. Don't keep it theoretical. Say, yes, go pray 2 rak'ahs, even if they're brief, and that becomes a good habit. Wallahu a'lam.
Is there a problem with brushing teeth during fasting?
Is there a problem with brushing teeth during fasting? No, it's a sunnah. Siwak while fasting is a sunnah. Siwak in general, what's the ruling of brushing one's teeth in our deen? Brushing one's teeth broadly has 3 rulings. It's an emphasized sunnah. It's an emphasized sunnah to brush one's teeth in the wudu, in the Hanafi school. So if you make wudu and you don't brush your teeth, it is blameworthy. It's not sinful, but it's blameworthy. You left an emphasized sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there you can use a toothbrush and toothpaste, or you can use a siwak. Now, if you have neither, you're out and about and you don't have something to brush your teeth with, it's established for many of the Sahaba to just use your fingers, or use something coarse. Of course, if it's in someone else's house, you can't use their towel to do that, because they wouldn't approve of you using their towel. But whether you use these 2 fingers, right? So they say, for example, the index finger and the thumb, and you use that, and as you rinse your mouth, or something coarse. But that's one of the benefits of having a miswak, that you don't have to have toothpaste with it, so you can use it anywhere. So within the prayer, brushing one's teeth is an emphasized sunnah, don't neglect it. It's also generally recommended before the prayer, before religious devotions. Right? So before prayer, separate from the wudu, it is recommended to use the siwak before the prayer. The Shafi'is emphasize that one a lot. The Hanafis emphasize the one in the wudu, but both are sunnah. Just the one within the wudu is a sunnah mu'akkada. But a lot of Hanafis ignore the fact that it is a specifically recommended sunnah to brush your teeth before the prayer. And also before acts of devotion, before reciting Quran, before reading religious knowledge. If you're going to sit down to make dhikr, it's recommended to brush your teeth before, because you're addressing your Lord. Before meeting with people, right? It's recommended to brush your teeth. The Prophet would brush his teeth before he went back home after a long day out, for example. And also, anytime one's breath changes, it's recommended to brush your teeth. Which is why it's a sunnah to keep it's a praiseworthy thing to keep it toothstick on, but it's anytime one's breath changes or should have changed, don't be an optimist. Have su'al dhan, have an ill opinion of your breath. And so there's two categories we've looked at. Emphasize sunnah in wudu, recommended before prayer, before devotional acts, and before meeting with people, and before and any time one's breath changes, or before it changes. And the third is, so these are times when it's recommended, the recommended sunnah. The third category is, Abu Hanifa rahimahullah said, the siwak is from the sunnahs of our deen. It means sunan in deen. So the things our deen has deemed praiseworthy at any time, without being excessive. Some people look like, they're just chewing their siwak all the time. There's an adab to using the siwak, but so that's a little bit about the siwak. And so brushing one's teeth remains sunnah at each of these levels in Ramadan. The only issue arises that using toothpaste entails entering a foreign substance into one's mouth without swallowing it. So it is better to brush your teeth using a toothstick. If you insert toothstick, brush, take it out, nothing remains inside. So it's generally better to avoid using toothpaste. If you do, use just a little bit. Actually, toothpaste companies want you to use a lot more toothpaste than you imagine. You can actually Google it, how much toothpaste do I need to use? You'd be surprised. They use all these images of the whole toothbrush with toothpaste on it. You can get away with very little. So if you do use toothpaste, just rinse out your mouth once or 3 times, and then any residual taste is ignored.
Someone was asking, is it permissible to use female mannequins in my clothing store?
Is it permissible to use female mannequins in my clothing store? This is one of those issues where there's khilaf amongst the ulama about it. That to what extent can one use human form in either, like things like mannequins or illustratively, but the use of a mannequin without features, for the purpose of displaying clothing, for example, etc., is permissible. It's being used there just to display the clothing, and in those kinds of uses, at least the Hanafi scholars I studied with deemed it permissible, as long as it doesn't resemble a statue, doesn't have the whole, just like a plain mannequin, rather than it's made to look like a full human being with their color and so on. Right? That's permissible. Um,
Someone else was asking if they drank juice or ate food and then went to sleep, and then woke up after Fajr without having brushed their teeth, is there any questionable for their
so, food that was already in your mouth before, or residual food that's already in your mouth before Fajr time comes in, a little of it is excused. And a little, the fuqaha said the criterion be, it's less than the extent of a chickpea. Right? It's a little bit. Like, that's the kind of stuff that remains in one's mouth. You swallow it, but the mouth has nooks and crannies and stuff. That's fine. What you can't do is, so you have biryani not just for iftar, but also for Fajr. So a minute before Fajr comes in, you decide to pack your mouth with biryani. And you take a nap. Half an hour later, you swallow the mouthful of biryani in your mouth. Right? See, you create biryani pouches. So I don't know if you've ever seen, in the subcontinent they chew this funny substance, and there's people who pack it on the side, and there's some people who can pack multiple. It's not permissible to use any intoxicants, but they stick it between their jaw and their cheeks. Okay? Some people just put one, some put two, and they stick it in. Growing up, there's this guard. I used to talk to him all the time. He's from up north. He says, "Are you done talking to me?" I said, "Why?" I said, I need to chew now. So you just go and chew it. So something that you can't do. If you leave a lot in your mouth, which is not normally the case, that would not be excused. Before prayer, before fasting time, if you have residual stuff in your mouth, that's what you rinse your mouth once. It's better to brush before the prayer if you've eaten. But minimally, if you've eaten, you rinse out your mouth. Last question.
Someone was asking, what do you do if someone who has bad tajweed leads you in prayer?
What do you do if someone has bad tajweed leads you in prayer? And there's a certain part you got to take responsibility for yourself, right? Like you just show up at a random masjid where they're, it's like, someone married the wrong person. So I didn't know she's miserable. Like you chose her, right? So you got to take ownership, right? I don't like working here. There's the people who complain. The believer is not someone who complains, right? You need to take the means in advance. If you cared about marrying the right person, take the means beforehand, right? And so we should take our religious matters seriously. So, choose your masjid carefully. And it's sunnah to choose. The masjid of the neighborhood has rights over you. But where one does have choice, choose on the basis of where do they have people of learning? Where do they have people who recite well? Where do they pay attention to doing things in a right manner? Right? And then be part of the solution. Help your masjid choose the right people, etc. Be part of the process. If you end up in a place, unless you're learned, you can assume that most errors in tajweed are excusable. That's the position of the later scholars. Right? Most errors in tajweed are excusable. If you don't know the rulings of tajweed, you have no way of assessing is this excusable or not. The default is, if it wasn't excusable and there's learned people ahead of you, there'd be a commotion. And there'd be a commotion. Our deen has high standards, but it's also practical. Right? So if the imam doesn't have good tajweed, whatever, the prayer is valid. The prayer is valid. And it's not sunnah to cause fitna. Right? It's not sunnah to cause fitna. But you could suggest positive alternatives. Right?
Someone was asking for general advice about procrastination.
General advice about procrastination. It's like there's a book called Getting Things Done. What I found is that lazy people and I recommend to them getting things done, but what would the problem be? They wouldn't start reading the book. They'd get the book but not read it. So changing one's nature is difficult. Right? But we know from the teachings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and our Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam that human character can be changed. Human character can be changed. To have change, what we see from the Quran and the Sunnah, change from what we are responsible for requires three things. Right? It requires a goal. You identify what you're seeking. It requires a means, right? And it requires inspiration, right? That is renewed. So it requires three things. It needs a goal. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Al-qasd tablughu." Right? So if you find yourself lazy, you're lazy because you don't have clear goals. That's the first thing. So you need to think about three things. One is, like, what am I trying to achieve? You find yourself lazy in prayer. Why am I praying? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always tells us about our purpose. Truly you have in the Messenger of Allah the most beautiful of examples. لمن كان يرجو الله واليوم الآخر لقد كان لكم في رسول الله أسوة حسنة لمن كان يرجو الله واليوم الآخر, for whoever hopes for Allah and the last day. So if you find yourself not following the sunnah, you feel lazy, what's it a sign of? Most of us probably don't. Like you ask Zubayr, why aren't you following the sunnah? Say, I don't think I need to. No one will say that. Usually it's because there's a lack of purpose. Why am I following the sunnah? That to remind yourself of the goal. That's one of the great benefits of the Quran. It's always telling us about the hereafter and inspiring us to have a lofty goal. That's number one. Have a lofty goal. Number two, the means need to be clear. How do I do what I do? Sometimes we're lazy because we don't know how to do it. Either we don't know it at all or we don't know it partially. And that's where knowledge gives clarity. How do I do this properly? A lot of people, for example, they delay paying their zakat. Sometimes because they don't know why they're paying zakat. But number two, because they're kind of nervous. Sometimes they just don't know how at all, or sometimes they have a few underlying questions, they're hesitant. So we kind of just put it aside. I don't really know how to calculate my stocks, this, that, whatever, so they put it off. So that's the second. When clarity gives confidence. Right? That's number two. Number three, you need inspiration. And there's means of inspiration. And one is to read about the virtues of things. Right? To read about the virtues of things. Right? And that's from the Quran, from the Hadith, and so on. Whether it be religious matters or worldly matters. The Hadiths tell us about, remind us about the great rewards of worldly good that we do. Earning a living, etc. So books like Riyadus Salihin, for example, the Gardens of the Righteous, etc., they inspire us. Inspiration is also found by keeping good company. And good company is of two levels. Good company of peers. Right? Your network of friends should be people who are, they say, that one should keep company of those who are better than us in our deen. So one wants to be like them. Right? And one should have some company of exemplars. Right? Of exemplars. People that we can look up to. Right? That's how I want to be. Right? And that's how the early Muslims said, Wallahi ma aflaha man aflaha illa bi suhbati man aflah. By Allah, no one succeeded of those who succeeded except by keeping the company of those who succeeded. When we ask Allah for the straight path, what would he say? Ihdina sirat al-mustaqim, guide us to the path that is straight. What is the straight path? Sirat al-ladina an'amta alayhim, the path of those you blessed before us. How do you know it's the path of those you blessed before us? Because you look up to them. Right? And they're always there. That's the Prophet said, Ummati kal matar, my community is like the rain. لا يدرى أولها خير أم آخرها. It is not immediately evident whether the first of it's better or the last of it. Insofar as that there's good in the beginning years of the Ummah, there's good in the final days of the Ummah. Right? So keeping good company is very critical to ward off laziness. Dua, they say dua يستجمع الهم. Dua gathers one's resolve. You're feeling lazy, right? Raise your hands and ask Allah for everything that you know you should be seeking. And keep repeating the ask. Because the dua helps one be clear about the purpose, the method, and the inspiration. Right? Also, to ward off laziness, sometimes it's good to consult. Whether a friend or someone who can be a mentor. Right? And that's what friends are for. Right? And having good friends, whether a friend or consult someone in family, without falling into politics, can be very helpful. You're feeling lazy, don't think you're strong. Embrace your weakness. Say, I'm lazy. Hamza bhai, if you see me skip, the sunnah after the fard, remind me, please. Right? And that's, the early Muslims say, لا خير في صحبة لا تناصح فيها. There's no good in company in which there isn't mutual counsel. But of course, with gentleness, with mercy, with love, tactfully, right? In a good way. Wallahu subhanahu wa ta'ala alam. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Inshallah, we'll be starting this in 2 minutes, the session on from the Book of Assistance. Today it's on correcting one's beliefs.